We can't be there in person, but we are talking about a virtual San Diego Comic-Con this week. Hello, and welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about comic books and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I'm Todd A.
Taylor Trask. It is Comic-Con week, Todd.
It is.
Well, it's supposed to be, but it's not.
Honestly, yeah. I got mixed feelings about it. I'm excited for what we got to talk about today. I'm excited for a virtual Comic-Con. It's not the same, of course. But I just took a walk around my neighborhood, sweated right through my shirt. So part of me is kind of cool not being around 200,000 people.
You should just for old time's sake take a train to San Diego and just kind of walk the pier and just sort of, mournfully look and
Charlie Brown sad music playing in the background.
I was gonna say the Bill Bixby sad Hulk music, like da, da, da. It's just you in a knapsack just into the distance. That'd be kind of cool. That's a great Instagram photo. You do it for us, Todd. Do it for us.
It will surprise no one if you've listened to our previous podcasts on Comic-Con that I did in fact buy a new backpack this year.
That's right.
So every year I'm like, okay, is it gonna be a backpack or shoulder bag? No, it's gonna be this backpack because this backpack is whatever. And then this one that I love that I've taken the last couple of years, I got a new color of it. So, it's so stupid.
For some reason, that reminds me, this has nothing to do with anything, but it reminds me of the Jim Brewer story about Lars Ulrich. Jim Brewer does great impressions of all his friends, and so his Lars impression's spot on. But go find it on YouTube. He talks about the night he and Lars spent on the town in New York, and it ended with Lars finding some college kid's knapsack and throwing a fit about it. And Jim had to talk him down because Lars is either drunk or high or both. It's a funny story, but you just talking about backpacks.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Random, completely. If you've never heard of this before, look it up because you'll be like, oh, Jim Brewer was really funny. He still is. Yeah. You kind of forget, wow, he was really, really solid. And B, he just tells a lot of really good stories. So you'll probably want to go down a rabbit hole and just listen to all the Jim Brewer stories because all his stories his stand-up is basically his stories where he just does the impressions of his friends and it's perfect.
I was gonna say he kind of became like a Kevin Smith of heavy metal world where he took the stories he told about his real life were funnier than the stand-up jokes or what do you call those things on Saturday Night Live? Sketches. The Kevin Smith comparison is apt because that is kind of what I don't believe Jim Brewer has jokes. I think it's all just stories that are just really freaking. That's what Kevin Smith hasn't ever claimed he was a stand-up, but he kind of operates as one. Yeah. But it's a lot of just really good kind of observational / storytelling. He'll have a premise. He'll come out with just a premise about something he just wants to bitch about, and that will lead to 25 tangents that all sort of he's able to whiteboard it in his head and pull it back to the. Which let's bring it back to Comic-Con. That's a Comic-Con panel, the Kevin Smith one that is not happening this year. That was probably one of the longest running, most consecutive panels. That you just made me as we were talking about it, I thought, oh wait, is it not happening? It is in fact happening. That means everyone can join an evening with Kevin Smith on Saturday at 6 p.m.
Yay!
We'll get to that.
This is breaking news for me. This is great.
Well, one of the overwhelming things. Never mind. Let's go through the intro stuff first.
Yes,
we'll get into this. Yeah.
Yes. We are talking about Comic-Con today, in case it wasn't obvious or you didn't read the description. So get ready. That's to come. Hey, before we jump into that, I want to give a quick shout out. We were set to record about 30 minutes ago. And you had an Amazon delivery, and that bought me some time. And I had earlier today saw a little ad for this, so I grabbed Batgirl number 47, which has just come out. Highly recommend it.
Because it is a direct sequel, a direct canonized sequel as an issue to the graphic novel The Killing Joke. And if you know anything about The Killing Joke, the Batgirl, the Barbara Joker storyline is one of the most divisive, let's just say, events in DC history. And this totally, it both answers. It's a great follow up, but it also gives Barbara so much amazing agency. But it's also just really freaking well illustrated. Like it is. The cinematography of the thing is wonderful. There's some things early on that I don't want to spoil. But the whole premise of the story is the Joker shows up at her apartment again. So just keep that, and it ties into whatever the larger DC or Batman canon is right now. But it functions as both a another issue in that series, but also as almost kind of a clever little one shot where if you didn't even know the rest of the current Batman mythos in terms of like what's going on, this is just a nice little echo on the.
Oh man.
So definitely grab. That's my Comic-Con week pick of the week.
I'm afraid to get into the whole Killing Joke thing. Not so much that, but like the continuity issues. But no, I'm glad you brought a comic recommendation.
And it's all because you had to buy some goddamn crap from Amazon and pick it up. That's the only reason, Todd. That's the only reason.
It's just, it's just a balance of the of all the stuff we got to do to keep ourselves safe. And I truly wish that I had more alternatives to Amazon, but they are unfortunately my majority supplier of everything. And this week they actually had toilet bowl cleaner and Lysol wipes, and I was like, I gotta jump on that. Oh man. So as we've mentioned, it is Comic-Con week. San Diego Comic-Con. I have gone for 13 years, 12 years, something like that. Yeah.
Whoa!
From 2008 up until 2019, so 12 years. And yeah, so this is a big deal. I'm so glad they called it off. I mean, I remember in March and April, as cases got worse, thinking like, there's no way I will feel safe in that environment. Like, I mean, it's you're way too closely packed. There's no way to police like a 6 foot distance, masks, no mask. It's not even going to matter. I mean, and a thing we've brought up many times, which I hope is just a point of comic relief, although it seems really stark in these times, is that I did catch swine flu in 2009 at Comic-Con.
I keep forgetting this.
So I have, been quarantined after Comic-Con. My doctor was like, wow, you're Orange County patient 0. We haven't seen this yet. And they had to send my stuff to the CDC and get it verified, tell me to stay home. It's nonetheless, like I've returned. I have gone with caution as my friends and I have gotten older. We've, adapted certain comfort habits, but like, as we're especially in the world of Uber and Lyft, as I always say, like it's much easier to like check out, go back to the friend's house, take a nap, take a shower, anything to like feel like, hey, I'm not like flesh to flesh with hundreds of thousands of people.
And this was, let's keep in mind, they canceled it back in, what was it, April? Was that somewhere in April? It seems like that's when it happened.
I want to say it was May. I remember it like getting pushed, but Dragon Con only canceled like last week. So Dragon Con is even more flesh on flesh. Literally,
remind me when Dragon Con is in the year?
It is Labor Day. So it's coming up like, first weekend of September in Atlanta, a hot spot. But the whole, Comic-Con has a similar thing where there are hotels next, on every side of the convention center where it's full of guests. But Dragon Con, those hotels are literally connected with skywalks. So
Jesus.
there is no, there's nothing different about Comic-Con, but at Dragon Con, to go to my room, I had to take an elevator, and I was never on an elevator with less than like 10 people, like on a tiny elevator.
Well, where I was going with all this was that they announced in May, hey, we're going to cancel it. Imagine if they hadn't, and like they didn't anticipate this surge that we're in right now, where California might have to shut down again, just as a whole thing.
I'm so glad that they did, because then give them a little bit of time to actually plan the cool stuff that we're about to talk about, which is a lot of virtual stuff that they've got planned. But you've also sort of crafted your own home con, I think, pretty well. I'm actually kind of inspired by
Oh,
your
cool.
stuff. So jump in.
Yeah, and I'll just kick this off with saying that Comic Cons all over the world are getting canceled. So it's not just San Diego. I I I want to say Emerald City was one of the first ones to get canceled. I can't remember if they went through with it this year, the Seattle one, because
Mm.
that's always sort of February, March. Um, but this seriously impacts creators. So I would say one of the first things you can do to have a good virtual con is get on Instagram, look up your favorite creators, artists, and writers, follow them. Almost all of them have a Patreon or a Ko-fi or Coffee or whatever that tipping system is called, and it's throw them a couple of bucks because they are losing out on a ton of income from this.
Hmm.
And especially if they had planned in advance, that means they probably already spent the money on making all those prints and everything.
Oh,
Um,
good point.
so they're stuck with like inventory at home and they are probably really happy to sign it, personalize it, and ship it to you. So they do that first. That's what I would say. That's your first step into the virtual Comic Con. But I also, a couple, I started thinking about this, like, how do I kind of duplicate a Comic Con at home? How do I keep up with this? Um, so on one hand, it's cool to be able to focus on panels. On the other hand, I didn't take off from work like I usually do. So I'm going to be squeezing in panels in between everything. Comic Con is doing, um, I mean, it looks to me like the same load of panels. Now, there are a lot that are missing. There are a lot of things that just won't fly, like, the big room, the big screening kind of thing. But there's a really full slate. And I think for the most part, these are all going to be open YouTube streams.
Oh,
If,
so
yeah,
lovely.
if you go to comic-con.org, that is the official San Diego Comic Con website. Right in the front there, you're going to, on the homepage, you're going to see a 2020 Comic Con at Home. Click on it. You'll get a schedule. Every single event has a YouTube link on it already. So you can, there's even a scheduling app if you want to go so far as to like add all these to your own custom queue and get reminded when they're all coming up. But that's, to me, it's like I'm going to hopefully get a lot out of those panels. Feel a little bit of that magic. But I also sat down this week after I got the schedule from Comic Con, and I actually only I think got one vendor email me about like how they're going to do Comic Con exclusives, which is a cool idea that they're doing them online and releasing them sort of like the same way. Like here's the Thursday exclusive, here's the Friday exclusive. And it may just be that I've successfully avoided getting added to all of those mailing lists, but I was
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit surprised that I wasn't like overwhelmed with, here's every exclusive.
I'm
Um,
surprised Drown and Quarterly hasn't dropped a big sale of some kind yet. They're usually
yeah,
the main ones that go hog wild every year.
yeah. So like I said, with supporting artists, I was also thinking about what are the things I miss at Comic Con. And unfortunately, the top 10 were all like spend money on something, of course. I didn't even put them all in our notes because I just kept thinking like, well, then I buy this and I buy that. And I was like, oh my God, it's just buying stuff. I buy comics.
uh,
You mentioned Batgirl. That's one of those things too, where, I can see myself in some vendor's booth and going like, oh, wow, this ties into the Killing Joke. Let me pick that up. Just that thing of like, I can get this anywhere at any time, but if I'm right there, it's full of comics. Um, I stock up on comics. That's one of the things my friends and I have talked about. Is like, what are we going to do this year? We're not all going to come back with like a bag of like, what are we, what are we reading next? Fortunately for me, and a big plug to the people at Humble Bundle. Humble Bundle had an image bundle, and it's humblebundle.com.
Tell
They
people, for those of you who've never heard of it, explain the concept.
Sure. They do, and I'm sure there is an actual schedule to this, but it seems to be sort of monthly-ish. They do bundles of a whole bunch of geeky stuff that you might like. And you are able to sort of buy in at a tier, get this whole bundle of stuff, and then designate how much of that is going to go to the brand that donated it, how much of it's going to go to a charity, and then a tip for Humble Bundle. So, for example, this image bundle for I think it was $18, you could get 90 something graphic novels. It was insane.
Wow.
So they were all just, and they gave you the option EPUB, PDF, or CBZ. So you, like, for that $18 donation, I was able to say, hey, give $5 to Image, give $5 to the charity, and give $5 to Humble Bundle, and however. Sorry, I'm not doing the math correctly, but I was able to adjust it as I wanted. So if you want to give the brand nothing, you can do that. Often they have video games, a lot of Steam games. Earlier this year, I bought a Humble Bundle from Asmodee that was all like a Steam and other online systems. Like they're tabletop games that we talked about this a little bit last week, adapted to digital play. I've bought a ton of RPG stuff on Humble Bundle where, it's like, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of curious in Pathfinder. Here's 100 books on it, so I'll get everything. Anyway, they had an Image bundle this week, and I'm sure by the time our episode airs, it has since expired because they are all limited time. But, I hesitated briefly, very, very briefly on whether to buy it or not, pulled the trigger. But it was that thing of like, you hesitate because you go, I don't need 90 graphic novels.
Well, that's just it. You had sent this link to Drew and I on Google Hangouts, and I was like, and I was serious. I was like, are you trying to intentionally blow up my TBR pile? It's already bad enough. Like this would put me in complete TBR debt for, at least 3 years minimum. It's just like, I would never buy another new thing again. It would be awful. So I had to decline this particular one, but then I went and grabbed 2 things that I saw featured in it anyway, just to support those folks.
But this was one of those bundles where I want to say it was even this year, but it may have been last year when I think very similar circumstances. I had sent an Image bundle out to you and Drew, and that was a case where everything I was interested in, I already owned a good portion of it.
That's right.
Or it was a thing like, I already have some of these in print. I don't really want the digital copy too. So I did not do that bundle. But this bundle had a whole bunch of stuff that I've always wanted to check out. And it felt like for $18, like I'm going to do this, and it's worth the price of admission. So I just thought I'd call out a couple of those. Monstress is a thing where I've seen, and her name just escaped me.
Oh dear, that was
It's not Marjorie Liu, is it?
I have it pulled up right here. It is.
Good.
It is Marjorie Liu.
Okay, I've seen her on a panel.
And Santa Takeda as the artist.
And really cool art, and like I've enjoyed watching them on panels at Comic-Con past, but had never checked out the book and got volumes 1 through 4 in this bundle. Invincible volume 1 through 3, which is a book that you've read. Have you read all of Invincible?
Oh God, no. I've read
the
latter half just about, but I am ignorant of the first half, which is great because Amazon's doing their animated movie. They've just announced the voice cast for
that's cool.
This moment, but like no, it's the early stuff because the the illustration gets better as the series progresses and they bring in new illustrators and stuff. So it's those first couple volumes. Let me know how you like them because I've heard mixed things. Well, but as a completist, I'll have to go back anyway.
It's the sample platter.
Yeah.
But because of the completeness of the bundle, it is to me more appealing than if I just a bundle of single issues is just going to drive me crazy because then I'm going to find 10 things that I want all the the follow up on, and I'm going to have to spend hundreds of dollars to to collect that if I wanted it. With this, it's like, hey, volume 1 through 3. If I love the first volume, I got follow up. But if I don't like it, no problem. There's plenty of other stuff in this bundle. Nail Biter is a comic that my friend Craig had recommended to me. It's about I think the premise is what if every serial killer was born in the same town. Said it is crazy graphic.
That is I did not realize at all that's what that was about.
And when he had told me about it a week before I saw this bundle, I had looked it up on Comixology, and I think the first volume might be free to borrow. And, and I was like, whatever. But, it comes in a bundle, volume 1 through 6. So again, if I like it, I got 5 more volumes.
I'm not gonna lie. I thought Nailbiter for Real was a story about somebody with trichotillomania, where they had just, like, but like in a hip sort of, in vogue comics way. I was like, that seems interesting. That'll be later on. I didn't realize it was about assassins or something cool like that. So I'll have to give it another look.
Nowhere Men, which
yes,
you were following.
Yes.
They're Not Like Us as well. There was
another good
at
one.
least
both of them Eric Stevenson led titles. He's the publisher at Image, and he had to cancel his own titles. It's very sad. But yes.
Yeah. Another one that Craig recommended called God Country, which is one of those where I had grabbed the single issue. I think maybe at Comic-Con, where I picked up like the first issue of it, and then it just didn't follow up. It's one of those like, I'll get the trade when it comes out. Forgot all about it. It's in this bundle. Snot Girls, a title I've always been curious about.
God Country, you're gonna like.
Cool.
Really
maybe you and I had talked about it, and that led me to pick it up or something. I know I have like issue 1 sitting in my.
I grabbed an exclusive trade cover of that at a wonderful little comic book shop in Raleigh, North Carolina. When I was there, when was that? 3 years ago now. Jesus, I was out there several times throughout the year. Stopped there, and so I have a great little exclusive blue cover. But it's a lovely little book. It's a one volume series.
Yeah,
but it's wonderful.
Well, that is a great thing that Craig pitched as well, which is like, hey, it's wrapped up in 6 issues. And that just sounds like such a cool idea. There's another one like that called We Stand Guard. That was one where I'd also gotten it. Maybe these came from the Image single issue sale, where I think it's sort of about like battle mechs, kind of a Pacific Rim sort of situation or something, where I'd gotten one issue and was like, I'm intrigued, but never followed up. And now I've got a whole volume of it. There's also, it's probably too late to take advantage of this now in Humble Bundle, but there was Black Science volume 1 through 5 in there. Mm-hmm. So, I know our buddy Drew was excited about picking up. He said that makes it worth the entrance price. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's how I felt about Monstress. Like, hey, that's, there's the entrance fee for 4 volumes of that. But I definitely feel like I got my comics covered, and obviously you and I are we try to support indie publishers and proactively shop local and stuff like that. So, I'm not totally doing a good job of that with Humble Bundle, but it, allowed me to mainline the comics this week. And I further thought, what else do I miss? And the past couple of years, as I've gotten into a gaming hobby, although I'm by no means a good collector or super hobbyist to that. I have been checking out role-playing games as well as going to like the board game demos and stuff like that with my friend Chris. And I have had to, I fortunately, this is one of those things where a lot of times you have to sort of consciously set in motion, like, how do I do good with my money and my purchases or something? And I had a moment of clarity a couple of weeks ago where I thought, you know what, don't be so hard on yourself for using Amazon for a lot of stuff, because I am getting really active on Patreon and Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And that is money directly to creators, and I felt like
and new stuff that wouldn't maybe exist without you.
And I feel has filled that gap. And even this morning I was filling out a backer kit where I had, if you're unfamiliar on Kickstarter now, there's always a way to throw in a buck that says, I'm supporting this project. I'm not necessarily in it for a reward right now. The trick being, when they send out the backer kit, they will offer the rewards as add-ons to that. So you're kind of like throwing in a buck to say, hey, I support you, just not $75 right now. But if you get funded, I might be interested,
Nice.
So just this morning, I had one of those where I thought like, oh, it's going to be like a free PDF download or something. And then I went, no, why am I dicking around? This is an independent creator. They're doing something cool. Here's, $20. Give me the physical thing. And so that's kind of how I'm filling that gap. It's not the immediate gratification of Comic-Con where I, come home with a backpack full of stuff every day. But those are my, that's my outreach, I guess, for better or worse. And of course, we do a weekly podcast on comic books. So hopefully I'm
Before we leave
supporting
the world of Image, I just want to mention, if you're still at home, this is July 2020. If you're listening relatively around this time, the Image Revolution, which is the documentary about the founding of Image Comics, I've seen it a few times. Awesome little documentary. Currently free on Amazon Prime, should you have Prime. So check that out if you are feeling like you want a little more this Comic-Con week. Back to you, Todd.
Oh, I love the interstitial. So yeah, then I thought we could talk a little bit about some programming that's going on that's virtual, as we already hinted at. If you go to comic-con.org, you don't need a login right now to get in to see all the YouTube links and stuff. So my other thought is that it's kind of fulfilling that thing that you and I have talked about over the past several years, which is like, why aren't they putting these panels up as soon as they're done?
Yeah.
Like even if you could just buy a ticket to watch from home, that would be great. And honestly, this is going to be a huge experiment to me this year in finding out if I would really prefer that, because I would love to buy a 1-day ticket, go do my shopping. I'll tell you, one of the other things I miss is like talking to the creators and going to Artist Alley and stuff. So that I can't really replace. That's Instagram comments.
Which honestly, that should be the focal point of Comic-Con anyway. Like that really, I mean, the panels are fun, yes, but the Artist Alley thing is like, that's the heartbeat of the whole experience, in my opinion. That's like, for a number of reasons, right? I like this idea. And maybe, it's an experiment for you, but it's also an experiment for them to see, what the attention is, what the user experience is like, if the people, if they can snag more people to be on panels, if it's virtual. Like I hear rumor that it's going to be like an hour-long interview with Charlize Theron, just about a number of things. Would she have done that necessarily? Maybe. Would it have been the same format? Probably not.
No.
So there's a lot of, my guess is this is one of those things that, if we're back to some semblance of normal next year, like this may continue alongside or like in conjunction with the physical event, and then you have kind of what you're about to propose. You go for a day, and then you just have the virtual tickets for the rest of the week.
Yeah, there's a terrible forced scarcity with Comic-Con, which is because of the way they sell tickets. You get online. If you're fortunate enough to get in to be able to buy your badges, you can buy for 3 people. You can buy for yourself and 2 other people. So you've basically got to coordinate all this online. Everyone's in their own little chat room, like waiting for one of them to get in. It's like a mini lottery all over. But once you get in, there is no sense in buying one ticket.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, how could you don't even know the programming. So how could you even choose, Thursday through Sunday? You default to buying all 4 days. Yeah. And then inevitably, my friend Pat's always like, I've never had to buy a badge because one of you doesn't want to go on Sundays every year. So he just gets a badge from someone, and then goes in, does all his shopping, and he's good, because panels you can see online later. Well, sell a digital ticket, or, put advertising on your YouTube channel, or, sponsors or something. And then let us, like, there's so many. Well, it is physically impossible for any more people to experience Comic-Con in the space, because there's no place for them to stay in the city. But you could do a more distant Comic-Con if it's like, hey, here's the Friday crowd that's shopping.
Here's something that we picked up. So my business is flirting with helping produce virtual events for like conferences and trade shows. We've got a couple test cases in the hopper right now, but we learned something that I think applies very perfectly here, which is when you think about virtual events, the most analogous example is live sports. Like you've got the football game in the stadium with all its accoutrements, or baseball is probably more tactile than that. You got the baseball game in the stadium with all the accoutrements. It's a full sensory experience. But then how many extra people watch on TV? Comment online. There's an entire studio that's built for people to give you an at-home experience of that same thing. Like, why couldn't Comic-Con have that?
Yeah,
it would be so easy, and it would just function as an ongoing commercial to be there live. It's like, who's not going to sit there at home and watch it live, digitally, and go, God, I want to be there someday. Like, it's just going to amp that up and make it easier to, for people like me to make that leap. I would do it, but it's like, if I was constantly reminded, it's like, oh my God, I would just feel
like I was missing out by not being there. And if I physically couldn't go, I can still kind of have an experience, if like
It is.
Tragedy of some kind, or who knows.
I love that analogy. I definitely think more of this content should be available digitally, certainly at a much quicker pace than they've done in the past.
Yeah.
But to speak up for the live experience, there are two crucial things you're going to miss here. One is that the Hall H, for all the madness of that huge place, they can't replicate the experience of being among the first people to see a trailer for something exciting. And they can't even do that this year because I don't know when the fucking theaters are going to open. Oh my God, I swore again. I trying not to swear because now my niece and nephew know I have a podcast. But I mean, granted, you're in an exclusive crowd of what, 3,000 to 6,000
yeah,
when you see that trailer, but there is something exciting about that,
Sure.
But the other thing they can't replicate that I'll stick up for in the live experience is a lot of these smaller panels that I want to see. There is something so cool about going into that panel and realizing like there's less than 20 people here. That Maneater's panel I saw last year was so amazing. Like that made me like a lifelong fan of the Ministry of Trouble, the creators of that. It was so great. You can hear me gush all about it in many episodes from last year of Comic-Con, and then Maneater's book talk that I did as well. It's like it was just such a unique and cool experience, and especially so because there were few people there. So that's that, and that also goes along with that talking to the creators. There's just something about being able to go up to these 14-year-old girls who were creators on Maneaters and just tell them like, great job. Like your stuff is amazing. I want you to sign a poster for me.
I wonder though, could you not replicate that? I mean, I'm even imagining, remember GeoCities back in the day?
Of course.
That wonderful little service where kids, when you first got on the internet back in the late 90s, there was HTML to make a web page or something, but like hosting and all these other things was very difficult to figure out or come by for, a middle school kid or a high school kid even. And so there was this wonderful product called GeoCities where you could go and for free sign up, if you pick a city, and they were modeled after like real cities, and like you basically like pick a lot, and there's like a real road. There's like, it's very sort of representative of a town and a neighborhood. You pick like, if you wanted to make a country music fan website, which I did, you can like go to the music city, and then you have like, your country music neighborhood, and you get a website sort of builder, and then you can, it functions as a real website, but as a GeoCity site. Lots of people took advantage of this. The only reason I bring it up is just imagine, because remember they used to have the actual streets, right? Like you'd actually visit it, and like you weren't looking at like a list of profiles, you're like actually looking at like an overhead map of the city. So like insane. What if you had this, what if you literally had a really well done, almost like infographic kind of representation of the Comic-Con, trade floor, and even like, ancillary, rooms and stuff where like I could from an overhead view go, oh, that's cool. I'll click into this room and see what's going on. And like, actually you click in and immediately you have the live Zoom panel going on. You can come in, you can, and it doesn't have to be Zoom. It could be, Facebook, whatever it is, where I could come in and leave comments or questions, or if it just was boring, I could leave without making it feel awkward for the people. There's just any number of ways you can make it. And then you and I could have a panel, like they could charge less for like people like us, because we're not having to like rent physical hotel space. We can just like, side load our own stuff in. So like, there's a lot that, they're doing a lot now, but this could be so much more if they really wanted it to be. And there's a moment where I wonder if they're going to just go back to normal or really make this a really fun experience for everybody.
Well, there's definitely, my mind is spinning thinking of a Second Life Comic-Con. But
it's basically what we'd have. It'd be amazing.
As much as, I mean, it is, I do feel myself stranded in between these two worlds of like, there's something so interesting about that physical experience, and not just because it's physical, but because it's unique, and you feel like that was a thing that evaporated in time, like that panel that I saw, because it was so small, doesn't exist for anyone else. Like that's not even going to make it onto the web somewhere. But I am cautiously optimistic that this will reformat some other cons, and you centering on Artist Alley a minute ago is a great example of that, because that should be the heartbeat of Comic Con, but it is not the heartbeat of San Diego Comic Con, and it is one of their real oversights. You might go so far as to say failure, where they keep squeezing the artists out, and for the most part, I think all the artists in true Artist Alley get their table for free. They have to apply, they have to have so much published work, etc. So there are qualifications for getting in, but the friend that we've interviewed before about his experience there, Eric Coda, I know he got squeezed out last year, and now he had a lot more fun at con, but it is not the heartbeat of San Diego. And I would say Emerald City in Seattle has the best Artist Alley I've ever seen. I would probably put Long Beach Comic Con, oddly enough, as second. And I don't think San Diego has the worst. I think Dragon Con, my experience there, and granted, these are places I've been to Long Beach a couple times, but Emerald City and Dragon Con I've only attended once. Dragon Con had the worst Artist Alley, not because of the artists there, but because they pushed it to the side. Like it was in a basement of one particular hotel. It was very difficult to find, and you're like, what are we doing here? There's
just puts a bad taste in my mouth for the whole event.
Exactly.
Even if it was like the cool panelers or a really good store
Yeah.
sort of area or something, like if just not having that be. I mean, you could even take the novel approach. I forget what it was. Whatever that little con here in the Springs, not Colorado Springs Comic Con, but like the little one that I went to, the guy who runs the comic shop in Manitou puts it on. It was in January, or has been up until COVID, but they put the artists, they just intermingled them amongst, because most of the booths were the experiences were in reserve rooms, the panels were in reserve rooms. This is all in a convention center kind of hotel situation, and then. But the walkways to and from everything, that's where all the artist stuff was. It was just all around you at all times, which I thought was awesome. It wasn't like a specific room so much as just everywhere you went, there was some artist with a booth that was just doing something. It was really cool.
Yeah, there's got to be hopefully this brings opportunity to things like that, because that can be purpose built to like a small experience.
Yeah.
You don't need to sell 200,000 tickets and risk the city's, economy on a show like that. It would be so much cooler to, and it'd probably be great for the artists too, to be able to stay local, or at least travel to a minimal degree, if they knew they were going to get that heightened exposure and stuff. I'll say, just to plug one more con, like WonderCon, which is put on by the same people as San Diego Comic Con, that Artist Alley is even better than Comic Con. It feels like that's not exactly equal weight, but you can easily walk through Artist Alley and the independent publishers and feel like, okay, you're not being upstaged by anything. Whereas in San Diego, it's like, the big publishers have built these gigantic booths, so it feels like there's a city over there, and you're just kind of in the the slums of it in Artist Alley sometimes.
God.
But it's yeah. So that's that's the thing I'll miss. But I thought I'd touch on a couple the panels that jumped out to me, and if you saw any that jumped out to you, jump in. There are, one of the interesting things is Wednesday is always preview night, and the only way to get to preview night, now I guess maybe there are panels you can go to. There are panels you can go to on Wednesday. You don't need the special preview night badge, but it's a night for people to go get exclusives. If they've bought a 4-day pass, you can add on this preview night badge. So that's kind of one of the other unique things that's going to go away. But there are Wednesday panels starting in the afternoon. So that is the day we're publishing this. Nothing super jumped out to me on Wednesday, and it may just be because of my own schedule. I thought I can't make it. But Thursday, there was a whole bunch of competition. There's this one.
Oh, dude, Thursday is ridiculous.
Thursday
I'm
is
looking at it right now, just crying, because I'm like, I might have to have 4 screens open. I don't know what I'll do, but
exactly, and they're all at the same time. So, building a geek brand was one that jumped out to me on Thursday. It is at the same time as NPC storytelling and games, which I think is focused on video games. It's hosted by a writer that I've plugged before, Sam Maggs, and she works for a video game company. So I think that's what it's focused on. But I'm interested, like, just in RPG, storytelling in general. Like, yeah, let me hear about that. There's a Batgirls panel at 11, which I like. Is like, hey, we're not just talking about Barbara Gordon. We're going to talk about all the Batgirls. And I I just didn't. I don't have a lot of exposure to Cassandra Cain. I know she's probably everybody's second favorite if Barbara Gordon is their first. But I got a plug for Stephanie Brown. Like, awesome Batgirl. Was so bummed out when they retconned all that crap. But it also happens at the same time as a panel called Holly Weird Science, which I was interested in.
Ooh.
Which I of course have scrolled off of the description. It was a constructive examination of the depiction of science and scientists in TV and film. And I think that's so funny. Sort of taking the Mythbusters approach to like the depiction of the entire discipline.
Yeah.
Then on Friday there's a panel called Crazy Talk, Mental Health, Pop Culture, and the Pandemic, that is right at the time where I've got a standing weekly meeting, but I'm going to try to push that away so that I can go to this panel. But it is also at the time of what you previewed. There's a Charlize Theron sit down called Evolution of a Badass, which sounds awesome. I have just recently re-listened to the How Did This Get Made episode on the fate of the Furious, and them gushing about Charlize Theron in that movie and how she fits into the Fast and Furious world, and how
the car witch.
This amazing actor who sort of elevates the performances of all these hams, to like to give better performances. Except Tyrese and Ludacris, they were given 100% all the time. Anyway, then there's on Saturday. There are a whole bunch on Saturday. That was kind of overwhelming. The Kevin Smith talk is Saturday evening. There's a Finance for Creatives I thought I would call out, which is there's always good practical panels like that at Comic-Con. And if anything, this situation, the virtual Comic-Con, is really going to highlight. It's almost like what do I want to say? It's almost like, it is all like an online course where it's like, hey, I want to take the business track. Well, you can go through and just like pick out those really easily, And I'm assuming because it's YouTube, it's probably like after the panel's done, the video's probably locked in there, right? And you can just replay it. Mm-hmm. So if you miss it at 10 a.m., it's probably available at 11.
Well, that's just it. I'm hoping yes, because if it's free and open to just access, they should keep it up for at least the rest of the week, but hopefully indefinitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's because if that's the case, Thursday becomes a lot easier. I can just cascade that content out over the following week, because I'll probably end up watching most of it. Or at least having it on the background while I work. There's just a lot of good stuff.
Oh yeah. And I really hope that if they don't make it all public, I hope it's because they're running experiments on how to make it all public.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that they will eventually, but nonetheless, it's like, this is a great opportunity to like collect a lot of great user data and see what works and what doesn't. On Sundays usually like has a lot of fun panels and a lot of kid focused stuff. There's definitely there's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 30th anniversary or something.
Dude, that looks great. Like, can you imagine how fun that might be?
But that's also got to be, I just, as I said, the film 30th anniversary. Gotcha. I was like, that comic book like 40 years old.
No, the film, and I would argue a film that still holds up. It was the most earnest sort of, dare I say dark, like it was to the Turtles as Batman Begins, the Nolan Batman was to that. It's the same. It was just so refreshing. You're like, oh my God. And you watch it today, there's some things that feel dated, but a lot of that thing still holds up incredibly well. And it was independently produced. There was a big, huge gamble. And so the fact they took it that seriously is really, like, as a kid that was my target market. I was target market for that thing. But just, I am as objective as I can be when it comes to my past, because some of it just is garbage, in terms of the content. But like that movie, oh my God, it
blows my mind that, it makes sense that it's 30 years old, but it's like, that's a crazy thing to think. The movie is 30,
Yeah.
One thing I really wanted to highlight on Sunday is there's a panel at 10 a.m. called Little Fish, From Physical to Digital, thriving and growing. And Little Fish Comic Book Studio, I was totally unaware of this till I got the programming, is a San Diego nonprofit comic studio and advocacy group. Okay. So that's one of the cool things about having this huge Comic Con situated in the city, is that there are a lot of small nonprofits or businesses like oriented around comic creation and advocacy. And so that I thought would be really interesting to watch. It says they're taking a look at what where they've been, the history of the studio, and the impact of the pandemic on comic art making and the local community. So that felt like, that's a real good local thing to do. And it's one of those that I can only imagine was probably in the San Diego Library, which if you have not seen, is a gorgeous piece of architecture. And I feel like that must have been programming that was in the library, to like really focus on San Diego itself. There's, like I said, like you could pick your track. If you were into cosplay, like just go through the schedule and highlight every cosplay panel. You're going to get such good stuff. And because you're not there in person, having to deal with all your like physical needs and just your exhaustion and what your friends want to do, it's like design your own program this year and just hit the stuff you want and then check back into the the secondary stuff. I don't know. I'm just trying to look at this with hopeful eyes, like how much can I take in and feel like a participant and like I really got something good out of it. There's one more piece that I do hopefully annually, although I slip sometimes, and that is support the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund.
Yes,
so we've called this out again at Comic Cons. They are always there. They have a booth with tons of donated books, which are all signed by the creators. So you can get like your favorite creator, like a big names, on a Batman book or something. Like it's like, the big two are in there. We always point out, like we had interviewed a couple of years ago. Oh my gosh, I want to say her name's Amanda and George at
that's exactly right, at Muse Comics in Colorado Springs.
And then I ran into her at San Diego Comic Con working this CBLDF booth that same year. But it is cbldf.org. They are a First Amendment legal defense fund, specifically around comic books, which I know seems kind of niche and stuff, but they either join onto lawsuits, I forget that term, for being like, when there's a big First Amendment case, but they also advocate a lot for literature in schools and banned books and comic books that get rolled up into that. So it's like a, really education focused First Amendment advocacy group. So yeah, I'll miss doing that, and I will make sure to re-up my membership online. Although I think I forgot to do it last year. I don't think I'm a current member.
Well, there you go. Great excuse.
Great reason to go and do it. I won't miss seeing the Scientologists disguised as a literature company.
Oh my God! Does that happen at SDCC?
Oh my God! Every year. So, and it's like, because their chief Imagineer. That's what I'll call L. Ron Hubbard. The guy that just imagined a crazy religion and a bunch of people fell for it.
Do not sully the good name of the Disney Imagineers by associating with that charlatan. True. How dare you?
Exactly. That pulp novelist, he has so many stupid books that they've repackaged, and his name is like in, 200 point font on the cover of every book. And they just sit there looking like a bunch of robots with the most like out of touch graphic design. And you're like, who's falling for this, dude?
Yeah.
I got interviewed one time, but this guy asked me to take a survey out in the hall at Comic-Con, and it was me and a friend that, we're standing there, and he was like, so, what do you find this cover interesting or whatever? It was like about the art. And we're like, oh yeah, I guess so. It looks intriguing. It's like kind of swashbuckler, steampunky thing. And then he like, or do you like this one better? Or do you like this? He's swiping back and forth, and then he swipes to this one. And of course the L. Ron Hubbard is in like giant font. We both went, oh no. Oh God, we didn't know. And he was like, oh, well, what turned you off? And we're like, well, we know that idiot. Like, it's not. The guy goes away all frustrated. His dumb survey didn't work out.
We know that idiot. We know what you're selling.
Just to talk about other magic stuff that I wish I had been there to see this, with the passing of Representative John Lewis last weekend. which you and I both, felt like, wow, this is so much more impactful to us because we've read March.
Yeah.
One of the cool stories that went around was when he went to Comic-Con, to, to be there to promote March, I guess is the right verb to use there. He cosplayed as himself at the March. Did you know that?
No. What
So
does that
he
even
went
look
there.
like?
He went there in the trench coat and the backpack that or maybe not the actual ones, but dressed up like he was in all the photos from those marches.
Whoa.
And then,
Huh.
oh my God, I'm like tearing up just thinking of this. Then um, he gathered all these kids together and marched them around Comic-Con.
Oh,
Like
that's cool.
led them in a march.
Wow.
It's I mean, just what a cool piece of magic that that happens there. So yeah, that's a thing we'll miss this year, and
Yeah.
certainly miss with his passing.
Yeah, I've mentioned to you separately. I was just like, it's having read March. I'm glad I've read March already. I'm sure many, and no offense if you haven't yet. I mean, go get it. But a lot of people are now going to grab it in light of his passing. But it just yeah, I was able to sort of digest that moment. I think
Yeah.
even more so because I mentioned in that podcast he both in that book and in reality he comes off as like an American folk hero, like on the level of like Johnny Appleseed or Paul Bunyan or something. It's like John Lewis, like he needs like his own
Yeah.
song, and it's just like, and then up until just a week or two ago he was like still alive, like God, this guy is still here. Like
Yeah.
do we not, like, I'm so glad that March exists to just get that story documented very appropriately.
Yeah.
And just documented it all because it was compelling.
Well, and oh, you know what? I just forgot there was another panel that I wanted to mention, which was it's on Friday. It's at noon. We're talking Pacific time. It's called History Goes Graphic. And it is specifically about that topic you and I have talked about, which is like, how do you depict real historical stories in a graphic format? And I think it's up both of our alleys. But yeah, Friday at noon. That last year you've mentioned, oh my gosh, They Called Us Enemy.
Yeah.
And a couple of my friends went and got their copies signed by George Takei. And, there's all those sort of personal moments. And I've mentioned meeting John Hodgman there and feeling like this guy that's enriched my life so much. And it's so cool to meet him in person and just, even if it's just 10 seconds, the Axe Cop kid and co-creator brother Ethan, just to have met them at several cons and things like that is like, those are real special moments that I'm not going to get this year.
Yeah.
So I'm subbing as best I can with all of this.
I think you've got a pretty good. I mean, both is just something new, but you've really kind of covered a thorough. I mean, this is probably as fruitful a con as any, even though it's virtual. It's like I'm sort of inspired by all this. I'm going to spend the rest of the evening crafting my watching schedule, and if there's something, one thing you didn't mention in your notes, you had buy exclusives. Meh. So I'm assuming exclusives at cons aren't really a thing for you. They're not really a pull.
They're funny because on one hand, I always feel like I don't actually get any swag, but then I do have little pieces of swag that I obviously hang on to because they make other people jealous.
Uh-huh.
One of them is my Tina from Bob's Burgers hat, which is like this super cheap baseball cap. Like trucker's cap. It's just like the cheapest ever made, and it's just the top of her head on it. And every time I wear it to any geek related event, people are like, "Oh my gosh, that hat is so cool!" It's just the top of her face. There's Sideshow Collectibles always has these. They do one of those cool things where it's like you got to get their booth first thing in the morning. They give out 100 whatevers, and then they're done. So when you get it, you feel like I'm in that club. But then there's other things like I bought some D&D collectible pins last year, and literally one of them was next to me on the desk still in the packaging because I'm like, what am I going to put this D&D ampersand pin on, why did I fall for this being an exclusive? And I mean, I'm sure it was exclusive that week to con, but after that, it's
men who
probably
like in the 40s collected pins, and they have like their sashes with their pins, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh God, and they're so proud of their pins, Todd. And then you're just like, and then you get brought in. It's like, could I show you my pins? And you're like,
I mean, I'm not gonna pretend that's not me. But it's fun, it's one of those things that's just missing from physical experience right now. I have a D&D bag that, like, when I go play at game shops and stuff, that's the bag I always throw the dice and the books and the sheets in, and it has those pins on it. It has the things that identify me as a geek on it, and that hasn't been out of the house in 6 months. So it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all that to be said, I think that was pretty thorough. If you listening, or if it's still Comic-Con and you've kind of crafted your own schedule and you're proud of it, let us know, or share that somehow. You can reach us on Instagram. We're panelism.inc. It's panelism.ink on Instagram, and that's probably the best way to reach us. Just send us a direct message there. I was trying to think if there was anything else besides just that in the feed, but that's all Instagram is, Todd. It's just that.
I know. And we're at panelism.inc, which is a website address, and you can subscribe to us there. We're on every major platform now. Are we on Spotify?
We have been on Spotify for several months
Cool.
right now. Yeah, that finally was addressed. And actually, Spotify is where I only listen to podcasts now. So I'm glad we are there, because I'd be pissed if we weren't.
Yeah, we've had a big conversation, but we're also on that other one that we like, which Luminary or whatever. We're there.
Yeah, we are, which is, quick shout out to Luminary. They've got that's the exclusive Russell Brand podcast home, among other things. But they charge you to use it, and I'm sorry, that they don't charge you to use it for like listening to us, but they charge for like the Russell Brand podcast. But then a lot of podcasts that are popular that you probably listen to everywhere else are not available there for some weird reason. So like Kevin Smith's a great example. None of the Smod stuff is there. I don't know. Distribution, what's going on? Anyway.
Well, and we're on Stitcher, which is my go-to app.
Stitcher. Stitcher. Well, that was this great episode. I'm gonna go play my newly hooked up Super Nintendo Mario World. I resurrected that from my parents' house this last weekend.
That's amazing.
It's been several years. It still works because I keep good care of my stuff, but it's dodgy. To try to have to re-glue that to a modern HDMI TV has not been easy.
I was going to say, you've plugged it into an HD TV, so you've got pixels the size of your fist, right? Like
I have, dude. On another episode, I will explain what I did, because I actually lifted it from I combined the solution from 2 YouTube videos, and the translation is wonderful. Like, you'd be surprised.
I can't wait to hear this. Let's do games next time, because I've been dying to talk about some tabletop RPGs. So that would be great. We'll just cover analog, old digital, and games.
I love it. Until then.